wonder what inspired you to get involved in wrestling. Especially, I imagine there weren't a whole lot of girl wrestlers at the time. So,
Um, Honestly, I played softball since I was really young, about 4 years old, with my identical twin. And when it came into high school, I really wanted to venture out on my own.
mm,
And there was an announcement over the intercom about wrestling practice starting. Nobody in my family ever wrestled. I didn't know what it was, and I just showed up to preseason practice and fell in love with it. And
wow,
I found my spot on the mat, honestly, like instantly. So it wasn't anything or anyone. It was just me, I guess, going out on a whim for myself to kind of find myself
hmm,
outside of being a twin, which was
yeah,
kind of challenging, I would say at the time. She's an amazing person, love her. But we were kind of trying to find who we were as
yeah.
individual people.
And how did she? What did she think of that?
She's continued playing softball, and I stopped, which she was really shocked. But she supported everything. She actually came in and did a lot of our stats and stuff for us during dual meets, and
Hmm.
just
Nice.
really supported everything. She showed up to all my matches. She would travel. She would travel to nationals. She would travel to come see me. She was super supportive. So yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
What a great experience. Uh, who had the greatest impact on your wrestling career?
Um, I would say one of my biggest impacts was my high school coach, Casey Ryan. He never hesitated to let me know how good I was at it. And I would say at the time I didn't even know how to accept my own greatness and what I was doing and the path I was on. I really didn't know the path I was on. I didn't know what I was doing for the future. And he would rein me in. I was completely a teenager. And like at the point where I got my license, I didn't show up for one preseason practice, one.
Mhm.
And the next practice I showed up and he was like, "Why'd you miss practice?" Which I never missed practice. And I didn't have a good reason. I was like, I was just being a kid. And he was like, "No, like you have something inside of you and you are doing something bigger than most. You don't miss practice." And I was like, "All right, I will never miss practice again." But he held me accountable and he cared. And that was very rare at that time to have a coach that genuinely cared about what my path looked like for my future.
Mhm.
So I would say he's one of my greatest.
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Now, do you have a wrestling hero? And uh, this is an interesting one for me because did you look up to a guy or did you have some of the pioneer gals that you looked up to?
So I loved watching Sammy Henson wrestle
Okay.
at the time when I was in high school. But I would say Trish Saunders,
Hmm.
she really took me under her wing. She sought me out at tournaments. She got me in Sunkiss Kids. Like she invested in me and kind of told me where to go. But to be honest, she was in Arizona. I was a high school kid. I didn't have much contact with her. She was amazing when we had contact. I would say like I built I built what we needed. Like
Hmm.
I built the women that we need here, and I love Trish Saunders' support. She did great with me, but it was very limited what we had access to.
Right.
And my dream was for girls to have access to somebody readily, and
Hmm.
I decided to go out and build myself into the woman I am today.
Yeah, that great. It's pretty awesome. Uh, what is your most memorable match or event, whether as an athlete or coaching?
Oh man, I've had a lot. As an athlete, I wrestled on a world level. I won a lot of US Open titles. But one time when I was in high school, I was in the finals of a varsity boys tournament and I broke my collarbone. And when it happened, I had landed on my side and I was signaling to my coach that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And he came over and I turned like pale white because I wasn't breathing.
Oh boy.
And he put his hand right on my collarbone and it popped in. And I was all, I can breathe. And I was like, I can, and he was telling me the match was done. And I told him no. Like, I was like, no, please, like, let me finish my match. And I couldn't even talk. And I was just signaling him no. And I kind of pushed him off of me. And I was like, no. And he was like, what? And I was like, I want to finish. And I ended up finishing my match and winning. And at that point, I felt like it was kind of my true calling, and like I found my grit, I found who I was, and I wouldn't recommend wrestling on a broken collarbone
For sure.
by
Yeah.
any means, but
Yeah.
it kind of went to the depth of me of like, hey, you can get through some hard things right now. after I ended up going to the doctors and stuff. But at that moment, like, I found myself wanting that match more than I wanted my collarbone. And I didn't even know it was broken at the time, but
Yeah.
it ended up being broken. So,
Yeah, well, that's good because that kind of uh, feeds right into the next question. Wrestling is a tough sport, and there's so many places where you're challenged personally,
yes.
where you can either give up or continue to pursue it. Yeah, can you think of an instance, one of the most difficult things you had to confront?
Yeah, in 2004, I was number one in the nation and going for the first Olympic trials.
Mhm.
And 2 weeks before in practice, I actually had to have emergency surgery. I got the Tommy John surgery on my elbow, and it happened in practice, and I tore everything in my elbow. And I sat on the mat for a long time in the Olympic Training Center, refusing to get off the mat, but I knew I was injured and it wasn't a boo boo anymore. But going in as number one in the nation and having that dream of going to the Olympics and 2 weeks before having it torn from you was pretty dramatic, I would say. I didn't even have time to call my parents. I didn't even know how to call them. And I had to have Coach Terry Steiner, my Olympic coach, call them and tell them what happened. And the next morning, I was already having surgery on my elbow. Like, I asked them to duct tape it. I asked them to do anything they could,
Yeah.
but they said no. But honestly, the true thing was my resilience after coming back
Mhm.
and being able to face what happened, because it was pretty traumatic. Like, to have all your dreams not just in your hands, but living them,
Right.
and it was gone in an instant. But that's part of sport, and I had to learn that the world doesn't stop for me,
Yeah.
or my feelings, or my injuries, and I had to learn how to carry on and carry through.
And you wrestled after that.
Yes, I retired in 2007.
And I know that that's always a challenge too.
Yeah.
Always wondering if it's going to happen
Oh,
again.
it was a lot of
Yeah.
sports psychology after that.
Yeah, you bet. What part of your personality or character do you think have contributed to your successes?
I would say my resilience. I grew up in a pretty toxic setting when I was young. Raised by a single mom who is absolutely amazing, but grew up with a very abusive father. And watching my mom get us through that, and she's really my hero of all times. Watching her get us through that, and watching us come together as a family, very poor, didn't have anything really growing up, but watching her raise 3 kids on her own and showing us that we had to work together and be resilient in everything we did. When I stepped on the mat, I felt like it all kind of embodied in me, and I got to let some of my frustrations out,
Sure.
but I also got to really find that I was very resilient too in this process.
Mhm.
Because as a kid, it was pretty tragic, I would say.
Yeah, and if you've seen that in your mom, you want to be the same.
Oh yeah, my mom's my hero.
Yeah. If you could start your career over again, would you do anything differently?
I would not focus on my weight. Um, I would focus on my training and my technique
Mhm.
and the love for the sport. Obviously, we're in a weight class sport. It becomes very crucial at some points, but I feel like it's the hardest part of our sport sometimes and takes the joy out of it.
Mhm.
I would always go back and say, just wrestle through and be healthy. I mean, you have to have a healthy lifestyle, obviously, to compete at an Olympic level, but be healthy and see where you land in those weights, and don't worry about what that is all the time.
Sure.
Because I feel like it kind of took some of my joy away.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely does.
Yeah.
Now, this will seem like a strange question due to your age, but what would you like people to remember about you?
I would say, as a coach, helping people find their own light, and whether that's on the wrestling mat or not, but helping youth find their light in what they're good at, what brings them joy,
Mhm.
what their fears are, kind of facing all of those things. Like, I love watching kids find their light in this sport and what they take with them after. So I would say that's
Which is great.
what I love. Yeah.
Do you see that is it more challenging now than it was years ago?
Hmm, I think that it is not, because maybe because of the way I coach personally. I hone in on the mental and emotional side of things. We do a lot of technique, we do a lot of hard work, but I feel like I open the can of what people don't like to talk about, and I really hone in on them finding who they are.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
Well, Malinda Ripley, congratulations on
Thank you.
being inducted into the California Hall of Fame.
Thank you.